Everyone accepts humans evolved from apes. It's in textbooks, museums show the progression, we nod along. But evolved from what exactly? Which ape? When did we stop being ape and start being human? What made us us? Was there a first human? You see, we evolved from apes is just relabeling the question. It doesn't explain the mechanism or face what it actually means. What Darwin discovered wasn't just that we descended from apes, it's that there's no clean line, no moment of becoming human, and worse, we're still becoming something else. The reason no one can accept it has nothing to do with religion. It's about what human actually is. We evolved from apes. Everyone knows this. Millions of years, gradual change, Lucy the Australopithecine, the march of progress you see in museums. The timeline is comfortable. 3 million years ago, our ancestors walked upright. 2 million years ago, they used stone tools. 500,000 years ago, they controlled fire. 300,000 years ago, anatomically modern humans appeared. Simple story, clean progression, ape to human. But this skips the uncomfortable part. It glosses over what that progression actually means. It lets you think evolved from means used to be apes, now we're something else. Let me ask it sharper. At what point did we stop being apes? Darwin didn't ask, did we evolve? He asked, what does that mean for the word human? If species grade into each other continuously, and his entire theory demands this, descent with modification over countless generations, then where's the boundary? Where does ape end and human begin? Well, you might say the first one to use tools, or language, or abstract thought, or culture, or self-awareness, or morality. Wrong. Crows use tools to extract insects. They even make hooks. Dolphins have proto-language with signature whistles. Elephants mourn their dead and return to the bones. Chimps have cultural transmission of learned behaviors. Different groups use different tools, passed down generationally. Bonobos comfort each other after conflicts. Every proposed boundary fails under observation. Every trait we claim as uniquely human appears in diminished form in other animals. So what makes a human? The question has no clean answer. No answer that doesn't come down to more of X or better at Y. Try this thought experiment. Your great-great-grandmother, 10,000 generations back, about 200,000 years, was she human? You'd probably say yes. Okay. What about 20,000 generations, 400,000 years? Still yes? 50,000 generations, 1 million years, 100,000 generations, 2 million years. At some point you hesitate. You say, not quite human anymore. But which generation exactly? Which child was the first human born to non-human parents? Which mother looked at her baby and thought, well, nothing because she didn't have language yet, but which birth marked the transition? You can't point to one. The line doesn't exist. Darwin saw this problem immediately. He spent 8 years studying barnacles, 8 years of taxonomic work, because he needed to understand how species actually relate to each other. What he found? One species graded into another. Continuous variation across populations. No sharp divisions in nature. Everywhere he looked, forms blending at the edges. Populations differing by degrees, not categories. He published On the Origin of Species in 1859. Then he waited. 12 years. He didn't publish The Descent of Man until 1871. Why wait? He had the argument ready. He had the observations, but he knew what it meant for humans, knew the resistance he'd face, knew that applying his theory to human beings would force conclusions most people didn't want to face. When he finally wrote it, he was clinical, detached, scientific. Man still bears in his bodily frame the indelible stamp of his lowly origin. Not poetic, observational. Your spine is a modified fish backbone. 5 vertebral sections, the same fundamental pattern as in primitive fish, just adapted for upright walking instead of swimming. Your ear bones, the malleus, incus, stapes. These tiny bones that transmit sound are modified jaw bones from reptilian ancestors. We can trace each structure backwards through the fossil record. Your appendix is a shrunken digestive organ, useless now, occasionally dangerous, but functional in herbivorous ancestors with different diets. Your tailbone. You have a tail, it's just internal, vestigial, the remnant of what your ancestors needed for balance. The evidence is written in your skeleton, in your organs, in structures that make no sense except as historical modifications. We didn't appear whole. We were built from older parts, repurposed over deep time. Descent with modification. Simple phrase. Means you are a modified version of your parents. They were modified versions of their parents. The chain goes back unbroken. To the first living things. Here's what that forces. There was no first human, just a population gradually changing. Think of it like language. There was no first person who spoke French instead of Latin. Latin speakers had children. Pronunciation drifted over generations. Grammar shifted. Vocabulary changed. New words borrowed from neighbors. Eventually, centuries later, you have something you'd call French, distinct from Latin. But there was no single moment, no first French speaker, no child who said, "I will speak this new language while my parents speak the old one." It's continuous transformation. The same thing happened with humans. A population of apes gradually becoming less ape-like over hundreds of thousands of generations. But every child could still breed with its parents' generation. Every generation was fertile with the one before and after. There was never a new species moment, never a boundary crossed, just drift, accumulation, change. So what did we actually descend from? Not modern chimpanzees, common mistake. Not gorillas, not orangutans. A common ancestor, now extinct. Lived about 6 to 7 million years ago in Africa. We don't have the fossil of that last common ancestor. Not yet anyway, maybe we'll find it. But we can infer what it must have looked like from the pattern of relationships in DNA, from the anatomy of early fossils on both lineages, from biogeography. Probably tree-dwelling, like most apes. Probably knuckle-walking when on the ground, like chimps and gorillas do. Probably small-brained, about 400 cubic centimeters, chimp-sized. Probably fruit-eating, social, living in groups. More ape-like than human-like by far. If you could see it alive, you'd call it an ape without hesitation. You wouldn't see anything human there. Nothing in the face, nothing in the posture, nothing in the behavior that would make you think, that's one of us. Then the population split geographically. One group stayed in the forests of Central and Western Africa. Those became the ancestors of modern chimps and bonobos. The other group moved into the woodland savanna and open grasslands of East Africa. Those became us. And this takes millions of years. Not thousands, not tens of thousands. Millions. Small changes accumulate. Walk a bit more upright because it helps you see over tall grass and spot predators at distance. Slightly larger brain because it helps you track seasonal resources across a larger territory. Slightly better throwing because it helps you hunt small game and drive off competitors. Slightly more complex vocal control because it helps you coordinate group activities. Slightly better fine motor control because it helps you make tools. Each change is tiny. Each generation is barely different from the last. But accumulate those tiny changes over hundreds of thousands of generations, and you get transformation that looks dramatic when you compare start and end. We have fossils showing the sequence. Ardipithecus, 4.4 million years ago, still climbing trees effectively, long arms but walking upright sometimes on the ground. Transitional, Australopithecus, 3 to 4 million years ago, fully upright walking, feet adapted for bipedalism, but brain still small, about 450 cubic centimeters, only slightly larger than an ape. Early Homo, 2 million years ago, bigger brain, 600 to 700 cubic centimeters, using stone tools systematically, different tooth structure suggesting dietary shift. Homo erectus, 1.5 million years ago, much bigger brain, up to 900 cubic centimeters, controlling fire, making sophisticated hand axes, migrating out of Africa into Asia and Europe. Homo heidelbergensis, 600,000 years ago, even bigger brain, 1,200 cubic centimeters, coordinated hunting of large game, probably some form of language or proto-language. Homo sapiens, 300,000 years. Ego, us, anatomically modern, brain averaging 1,350 cubic centimeters. But here's the thing. These categories, Ardipithecus, Australopithecus, Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, are human inventions. We found fossils separated by hundreds of thousands of years. We needed to name them. We drew boxes around clusters of traits. Nature didn't draw those boxes. The living populations between those fossils transitioned smoothly. We just don't have fossils of every generation. We have snapshots separated by vast time. The divisions we make are arbitrary, useful for classification, necessary for communication between scientists, but arbitrary. Darwin understood this perfectly. Species are useful labels we apply to populations for our convenience, but the populations themselves don't come in discrete types. They grade continuously. Now here's where it gets more complicated. Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalensis overlapped for thousands of years in Europe and the Middle East. Both existed simultaneously. Both were human-like. Burial rituals, art, jewelry, body decoration, language almost certainly. Both had large brains, complex stone tools, social structures, care for elderly and injured, and they interbred. We sequenced Neanderthal DNA in 2010 from ancient bones preserved in European caves. Remarkable achievement. If you're of European or Asian descent, 1 to 2% of your DNA is Neanderthal. Not metaphorically, literally. You carry gene sequences from Neanderthal individuals who lived 40,000 years ago. So were Neanderthals human? By the biological species definition, members of the same species can interbreed and produce fertile offspring. That makes them the same species as us. But we classified them as Homo neanderthalensis, a different species, based on skeletal differences. Stockier build, different skull shape, larger brow ridges. Or more honestly, we don't know what to call them. Same problem as before. Gradual change, fuzzy boundaries, populations mixing. Your great-great-grandmother 50,000 years ago might have been half Neanderthal if she lived in Europe. Was she human? Her child, 75% sapiens, 25% Neanderthal. Human? Where's the line? There isn't one. Just populations mixing and diverging and mixing again across geography and time. Which brings us back to what human actually means. It's not a sharp category carved into nature. It's a useful label for a cluster of traits: large brain relative to body size, language, abstract thought, cumulative culture, symbolic thinking, upright posture, reduced body hair. But clusters don't have edges. Like tall or bald, these are fuzzy categories. When does someone become bald? After losing 50 hairs, 100, 1,000, 10,000? You can't point to the exact hair that makes the difference. At some point, you just start calling them bald. Darwin saw that species work the same way. We think of them as fixed types, platonic forms, essential categories. But they're not. They're historical accidents of survival, shaped by environment and chance. Every organism is transitional. You are intermediate between your ancestors and your descendants. There's no perfect human form you're approximating, no ideal toward which evolution is working, just what works right now, in current conditions, with current selection pressures, in current environments. And here's the part almost no one accepts. We're still evolving, right now. We're not a finished product. Humans 100,000 years from now will be different from us. Maybe different enough we'd classify them as a new species if we could meet them. Imagine meeting your descendant 5,000 generations from now. Would they recognize you as human? Would you recognize them? Selection is still acting on us. Disease resistance, altitude adaptation in Tibetan populations, lactose tolerance spreading in dairy farming, cultures, all changing in real time across different populations. Mutations are still happening. Every child born has about 60 to 70 new mutations not present in either parent. The population is still changing, still responding to selection, still accumulating differences. Darwin's conclusion: If he'd had access to modern genetics, there's no reason to think evolution stopped with us. No endpoint reached, no goal achieved, no essential human nature that's now fixed. Just a current snapshot in an ongoing process. Why is this so hard to accept? We want clean categories. We want human to mean something permanent, something essential, something that marks us as fundamentally different. We want to be the endpoint the goal evolution was working toward. We want to be separate. Darwin saw the resistance firsthand. That's why he waited 12 years to publish The Descent of Man. Not because the evidence was weak, the evidence was overwhelming by then, because he knew the implications were disturbing. What disturbs people? No special creation moment. No essential difference from animals, just difference in degree. No permanent human essence to point to. No evolutionary endpoint to reach. The religious objection is surface level, really. Underneath, there's a deeper issue that threatens human exceptionalism. We want to be categorically different from animals, separated by an unbridgeable gulf. Darwin's evidence says continuous variation, no category jumps. We are animals. Smarter than other animals, more complex in certain cognitive abilities, yes. But animals. Modified fish, modified reptiles, modified mammals, modified apes. Not just animals in a dismissive sense. We're still remarkable, still capable of mathematics and art and philosophy and asking why. But not a separate creation either. Not made from different stuff. Made from the same biological machinery, the same genetic code, the same evolutionary processes as everything else alive. The DNA confirms everything Darwin inferred from anatomy. We share 98.8% of our DNA with chimpanzees. The remaining 1.2% makes all the difference in outcome, but the shared foundation is undeniable. We can trace the exact mutations that differ. We can date the divergence molecularly by counting accumulated changes. Mutations accumulate at roughly constant rates, acting like a molecular clock. Chromosome 2 in humans is a fusion of two separate chromosomes present in all other great apes. You can see the fusion point in our DNA, the telomere sequences in the middle of the chromosome where two chromosomes joined, the remnants of two centromeres, one now inactive. It's right there in the sequence. Other evidence, broken genes scattered through our genome. We have the gene for synthesizing vitamin C, it's still there, but it's broken, non-functional, disabled by a mutation millions of years ago. Didn't matter because our fruit-eating ancestors got plenty of vitamin C from their diet. The broken gene persisted. Useless, but there, inherited from ancestors who also had it broken. The pattern throughout the genome. Modified ape. Not similar to apes in a vague way. Descended from apes, with specific modifications we can identify and trace. So when someone asks, what makes us human? Wrong question. Better question. What characterizes this current population of modified apes we call Homo sapiens? Big brain, yes. Language with complex grammar and infinite generativity, yes. Abstract thought, cumulative culture that builds on previous generations. Symbolic thinking, yes. All of these, but all temporary in evolutionary time. All gradual developments over millions of years. All still changing. Darwin's discovery wasn't just that we evolved. It's that human is a moving target. There's no fixed essence, no permanent definition, no bright line separating us from everything else. Just a population in flux, shaped by history, responding to environment, accumulating changes generation by generation. Next question. What will our descendants become? That depends on what selection pressures we face, what mutations arise, what populations mix and separate, what environments we adapt to. I don't know. Neither did Darwin. We can't predict it. We're still in the middle of the story, not at the end. I've got to stop somewhere. But understand, the process hasn't stopped. It won't stop. As long as there's reproduction with variation and selection, there's evolution. We're still becoming.